Hi everyone, this is Kale Mary.
And this is Soda.
Welcome back to another episode with Space Trio, where we talk about Triumvirate and all things related to the original series. Today, Soda's going to lead a discussion on Star Trek Discovery. So if you haven't seen this show on CBS All Access, beware, there are going to be many spoilers. The entire podcast today will be about everything related to Discovery and how we feel about it tying into just original series canon. You want to take us away, Soda?
Yeah, and I want to add that this is especially true for the second season, which ties much more to the original series than the first season. So if you only watch the first season of Discovery, this is going to have spoilers for the second season. All right. So, Discovery.
Well, I want to preface this, Soda, by saying that I have not personally watched a lot of Discovery, but I
Mm.
will try and chime in and ask questions and, where I am familiar with some of what's going on in the show. I think I have a good understanding of high level plot for both season 1 and season 2, but I may not know the details.
Yeah, and I think it would also be interesting to see how those things measure up to, say, their portrayal in the new Star Trek movies, in the Kelvin timeline.
I agree with you. Okay, maybe we should just take a step back and you can talk a little bit about initial reactions when there was an announcement of Star Trek Discovery.
Yeah. When Discovery was first announced, when it was first announced that it would be a show set 10 years before the original series, I think there were a lot of mixed reactions. A lot of people were obviously happy to have another Star Trek show, but a lot of fans were also disappointed it was set, so close to the original series because there is a general feeling that the original series is the most well known among the series in terms of characters and um, I don't know if I can say plot lines, but it's certainly very well known. There are very famous scenes from it, famous music, etc., etc. Um, and in general, in the general pop culture, this is the show that defines Star Trek.
It's very true. Um, I will say one of my initial reactions to hearing about Star Trek Discovery, not so much related to the fact that, okay, they're doing a pre canon show set before the original series. It was that they were limiting what kind of access we had to it. Because, as you know, traditionally, at least in America, when this aired on TV, it was on cable. And the same could be
Hmm.
said for all the Star Trek shows that aired here, at least initially, and probably before some of them were airing, in other parts of the world. It was always on cable, and most people have basic cable and could tune in and watch the show. Well, when CBS announced that they were going to put it on their streaming service, they required you to have a subscription to even watch it. I was a little disappointed because I thought this is cutting off your one of your biggest franchises from mainstream consumption, and probably not all of the fans are going to follow you over to the streaming service just to watch it.
Yeah, I heard this notion too. I'm personally not from the US or Canada, so it doesn't affect me as much. But I heard this complaint a lot, and I completely understand it. I think it also kind of it gives it's kind of a short term gain and a long term loss for them because yeah, short term they do get a lot of subscriptions from Star Trek fans, but what actually seems to happen is that the fans tune in. A lot of people actually tuned in after the season was over to watch the entire thing. They basically subscribed to the service for a month and then they canceled the subscription because they didn't need it anymore. So they had this very large boost during the airing of the show and like the month after it, and then suddenly they all went away. And I think that's one of the reasons why we see now CBS scrambling to make more Star Trek shows because that's basically their only draw. That's their only big franchise that attracts people.
Everything you said is just rings true here. It makes me worried about the future of Star Trek Discovery itself, because when they decide not to continue making seasons, how is it going to be then be consumed by just the general public? Will they only have to be on CBS All Access to watch, legacy episodes? I don't know. Because, I mean, when you have shows that ran as long as, like, The Next Generation, for instance, there are always
Yeah.
reruns on television somewhere, some channel. So, I mean, Discovery probably won't go as many seasons as is necessary to be syndicated in that way, but I feel like they're cutting themselves off from potential fans, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I understand what you mean, but I also think that the CBS All Access days are numbered. I don't think they're making enough to justify its existence, pretty
Mm-hmm.
much. Like I said, they seem to only get revenue from Star Trek fans.
So, I can't seem to recall, Soda, but when did the talk of Spock being in Discovery first come up? Was it when they were getting ready to launch the first season, and they sort of said, "Well, we may have Spock in there, bring him back as a character in the show or not," or did they wait until the second season?
Mm. Yeah, that's what I started to mention. When the first season, when the show was first announced, because it was announced to be set 10 years before the original series, a lot of fans, like I said, they had a mixed reaction, but a lot of fans eventually came to, as long as they don't take too much from the original series, as long as they stay focused on original characters and original plots, it could be, it could work. We would be fine with that. And I think the showrunners did say before the first season that there won't be, we can't expect to see Spock, McCoy, and Kirk at all. So a lot of people actually kind of liked this announcement. They didn't want to see this show to be. They didn't want the show to be too connected to the original series. And but then when they announced that the main character would be related to Sarek and Spock, it was also kind of people didn't like it very much, actually.
Yeah, at best they were hesitant about what kind of show they would be getting.
Yeah, because it does sound weird. On one hand, the production said there won't be Spock, there won't be Kirk, there won't be McCoy, but on the other hand, they were telling them, yeah, but the main character will be somehow related to, will be basically the adopted daughter of Sarek. So how would that work exactly? It sounded very weird. I think a lot of people kind of realized it sounded very weird, and it makes sense when you look at the thought production of the show. The show had very troubled production. The original showrunner who basically worked on the first few episodes and then left to work on because of you know there were rumors of difference of opinions on what the show should look like and what it should be about, and he ended up leaving for other shows.
Yeah, creative differences.
Yeah, I think originally there are rumors that originally the show was supposed to be more like an anthology series that like every episode or every few episodes would focus on different characters, and Michael Burnham, who is the main character, was supposed to be only the main character for the few first episodes, and then the story would move to someplace else. The show we eventually got, Discovery, is very, very different from that, though. So I think it does make sense. It does make sense that at first they said, well, there won't be any Spock, Kirk, and McCoy, and then the second season they changed their minds.
Well, from what I know, the actress who plays Michael Burnham was already well known from the Walking Dead television series. And I think I can't remember, but at that time, did they announce that Michelle Yeoh would also be one of the main characters of the show?
Yeah, they did, and well, they announced that she will have a minor, but she will be not the main character, but a background character, not exactly a background, a secondary character.
Right.
as of the word. She would be a secondary character, and she wouldn't appear that much. That's what they said at first. And a lot of people kind of actually were in favor of this. Michelle Yeoh is kind of a popular actress, so yeah.
Yeah, there were a lot of people who were excited about the idea of having her on any show, really, because she is such a well known and beloved actress.
Yeah.
She's done a lot of action movies. She's very talented. And so I think hearing that she was attached to the project probably increased the amount of interest.
Yeah, it did. It probably did. And basically, a lot of people, what I think the point is that before the show, a lot of people didn't want to see Spock in Discovery or any of the other original series characters. Only we did get Spock in the second season.
Before they actually announced a date of when the second season would air, they announced that Spock would be in the second season, but then it seemed to take them a couple of months to find the right actor. So I don't think they announced that Ethan Peck would be the actor for Spock until months later.
Yeah, I don't remember or hearing much about the actor. I'm glad they took their time. I think they made the right choice at the end of the day.
So when was it that they announced then that they'd have Anson Mount playing Captain Pike alongside Spock?
I think they actually announced Pike before Ensign Mount before Anthony Peck. I think the actor and the character were settled on pretty early on, and I think it makes sense too because we know so little about Pike, so it would make sense to put him more in Discovery. And while Spock is more connected to the story through Michael Burnham, I think they were kind of hesitant of putting him in because of the reason I said earlier, because of a lot of people didn't want to see this connection to the original series.
Do you think a lot of people were surprised by the first episode of Discovery when they started like right into the Cold War with the Klingons?
I think so. Yeah, I think people were surprised mostly at how the Klingons look and how they sound. I don't think we ever saw Klingons that look like this, and we didn't see, and we have never seen before this, so many scenes spoken only in Klingon.
From what I'm hearing from you, Soda, a lot of the initial reactions just to the news of Star Trek Discovery, maybe the first episode, surprised a lot of people.
Yeah. I think they were surprised also by the appearance of Sarek, actually, in the first episode. Because the show, before the first season, the show was so adamant about not having Spock, Kirk, and McCoy in the show itself, people weren't expecting to see Sarek there, of all people. Like, they knew about the connection, but they didn't think he would actually appear there. And they didn't think he would act like he acted in the series, which is like a very... I don't know if I should say a warm and cuddly figure, because he isn't exactly that, but he's much more warm and fatherly than he was in the original series to Spock.
I was going to say, and I think we kind of talked about this when we went over the secondary character podcast, but Sarek's relationship with Michael was very different than his relationship with Spock. And
yes,
I did watch the first episode of Star Trek Discovery. I think probably the two things that surprised me most in that episode, spoiler alert for anyone who's never seen the show, when they went through the scene where it was showing how Michael was related to Sarek and piece of his soul was with her, therefore they could communicate over long distances. Just the closeness of that relationship for obviously a sibling of Spock's that we've never heard of before. And then the second thing was that if she was brought up to be Vulcan, even though she's a human and she lived among the Vulcans and it seemed like she was very attuned to their culture and that she tried to emulate their culture, but then just her, I will say, passionate response when she defied her captain towards the end of the first episode really surprised me because it seemed incongruous with how she was portrayed in the flashbacks. I knew that there was something going on with this character. There was going to be some interesting character development for Michael Burnham that would tie into probably the later episodes in the show.
Yeah, I think we're supposed to interpret her emotional reaction as an out of character moment that is caused by her trauma. She has sort of PTSD caused by the Klingons that attacked her home when she was young and caused her to lose her parents. So I think that was the reason behind that.
Right, and it just really took me aback because I guess when I correlate it to Spock from the original series, right, there was very few times Spock do something that was totally against his nature. And one of them, of course, was related to Captain Pike.
Yeah.
When he essentially defied orders from high on and took the Enterprise and surprised everybody on the ship, including Kirk. And for sake of a promise that he made to his captain. I think I got some of those vibes with Michael. She was doing something that was out of character for her, and it was very shocking to probably everyone.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think in this show, in Discovery, we got the origins of the war with the Klingons, essentially. And we got a lot of Klingons, and I think the general reaction was there were too much Klingons in Discovery. Not a lot of people enjoyed all the Klingons in Discovery. A lot of people actually thought it bogged down the story a lot. It was especially concerning because the actors who portrayed the Klingons were very heavy makeups and very heavy costumes, and they could barely move their faces, and they spoke Klingon, which most people don't speak, and so it was very hard for them to emote through their facial expressions or through their dialogue. So the Klingon scenes felt very stiff to most people, and not a lot of people enjoyed them.
My initial reaction to seeing the Klingons in the first episode, outside of just the, like you said, the acting and the visualization, I was at least intrigued by seeing the Klingons at a point in their history where they were completely divided by different factions. And it's almost as if the only way for them to even fight a war with the Federation was for all the factions to agree to do something, but they were squabbling so much among themselves that they couldn't do it. And so you had this offshoot of almost a cult-like faction, right?
Yeah.
And
it's very religious faction.
Very religious faction, right? And they were all considered like heretics by their own people.
Yeah.
And they were really astonishingly violent. I mean, I suppose we've always known that Klingons are supposed to be violent, but we don't ever see that on the screen to such a degree, or at least in the other shows. I think that took me aback.
Yeah, I think people were also surprised that they didn't look nothing like they looked, in the original series. That's another thing. The look of the show was supposed to be, set only 10 years before the original series, looked nothing like the original series. And, partly you expect this because the original series was over 50 years ago, and the technology has improved since then. Makeup and costume technology, CGI, etc., etc. So you didn't expect to see, exactly the things you saw in the original series from the 60s, but it really did look nothing alike. So I think a lot of people were very disappointed in that.
Even the uniforms.
Even the uniforms, yes. And as far as the Klingons, like I said, I think because the original series took place in the 60s, they couldn't really show, very... the violence levels they were allowed to show were not that high, in public, in cable television, where children were watching this. And the Next Generation and Deep Space Nine and Voyager, etc. They were shown, in a different time, a little bit in the future, 100 years in the future, where Klingon society seems to have gotten less violent with time. They still hold on to a lot of traditions from the time, but they are less violent. So I think it does kind of make sense that they were more violent back then. But yeah, Discovery does have a lot of things that don't feel very Trekky to a lot of fans. A lot of violence, a lot of ship battles between ships, a lot of space battles, a lot of action, basically, which people aren't used to seeing in Star Trek that much.
Well, the whole premise for Starfleet, right? Because here you have the
Yeah,
Federation's on the verge of war, and Starfleet vessels seem more like war vessels than they do exploratory vessels.
exactly. Yeah.
It makes you wonder how there's such a big change in 10 years.
Yeah, but it does tie, first of all, it does tie into the theme of the first season, or the theme that kind of came out of the first season, of the causes that make Starfleet a little bit more militaristic. It's bad, basically. They do come to the conclusion that it's bad. But it's also, you know, a lot of people, I heard a lot of theories, for example, that because the war with the Klingons was so violent and so many Starfleet people died, that's why, for example, Kirk became the first, the youngest officer to ever be promoted to a captain of the flagship of the staff of Starfleet, because they had a very a very immediate shortage of people, basically.
To be honest, Soda, I have to wonder if there was any influence in Star Trek Discovery from the Abrams verse, because the Abrams verse, even though it's supposedly about an alternate universe, right?
Yeah.
Not even quite an alternate universe. I mean, Spock Prime goes back and supposedly goes
Yeah.
back or goes into an alternate universe. The Federation in that universe was a lot more militaristic. They had that big fight with the Romulans that destroyed most of the ships, and Kirk was promoted as a cadet to a captain. So, but the movies, of course, were made for cinema. So big explosions
Yeah.
and very condensed story told in a very short period of time. And
Yeah, I think the Star Trek movies always had more action than the series.
they did, but the way the Klingons looked in that alternate universe was very similar to the way they looked in Star Trek Discovery, and just the way they acted as well. When I first saw the Klingons in Star Trek Discovery in that first episode, I was like, oh, these look like the people from the 2009 movie. Or these look like the Klingons from the 2009 movie.
Yeah, I don't know if it was directly influenced by the movies, or just it just the way things look now, the way stories are told now. They have these effects, they have these expectations. People like spectacles, they like action and good costumes and creatures.
Right. So Star Trek 2009 was actually did very well in the box office.
Exactly.
I wouldn't be surprised if, some of the people they had on board to help do Discovery were thinking we could do some of the similar like big space scenes and mean looking villains and
Exactly. Part of the reason that the Star Trek movies did have more action than the shows is because they simply had more budget, and they had, the ability to have these effects that weren't exactly translated quite as well to the small screens of televisions back then. But now we have high quality, screens at home with our laptops and computers and even HD TVs, and how our shows look better than movies did 20 years
mm-hmm.
ago.
So one of the things I did like about the opening to Discovery is the fact that on the bridge you had more non-humans, non-human crew members on the bridge, just in general on the ship, than of course, you ever did. Basically, an all-human crew for the Enterprise in the original series, except for Spock.
Exactly, because they have all this budget, they can have more creatures that actually aliens that actually look alien.
Right, and who were primary bridge crew, like Saru, right?
Oh, exactly. And one of the shining, one of the bright spots of the show, besides Michelle Yeoh and uh, I forgot his name. He's playing Lorca. He's also kind of famous. Jason Isaacs. Yes, Jason Isaacs was also, a very popular actor. He's also Doug Jones, who plays Saru, who is very well known for playing inhuman characters, monsters and aliens and the like, and he does it so well. He is really a costume artist. He is really a great, great, great actor in costume.
Remind me, I mean, how long did Brian Fuller stay on the show? He's the one who left because of, quote, creative differences, right?
Yeah, I think he was only responsible for maybe the first 3 episodes,
Okay.
maybe the fourth, but I think the first 3 episodes.
Partly why I brought up Abramsverse was because I knew that Alex Kurtzman, who was a major part of the Abramsverse movie series or the various movies that came out, he was heavily involved in Star Trek Discovery.
Mm.
And some people seem to think that Kurtzman and Abrams have some of the same vision or lack of vision when it comes
Yeah.
to women and
Yeah.
whatnot. But I didn't see much of that in at least the beginning of Star Trek Discovery, so perhaps that pitfall was avoided.
Yeah, I think one of the greatest complaints against, you know, um, Abrams is not a specific treatment of like women or minorities or whatever. It's just that his vision for Star Trek is very much Star Wars instead of Star
Yeah.
Trek. Yeah, I think he even said in one interview that he never really got into Star Trek. Star Trek, he really liked Star Wars, so he changed Star Trek a bit so he could like it more. And people kind of realized that he's basically saying they made it more like Star Wars, which I like more. Um, and there is kind of, a point to it. I'm not sure if Kurtzman is that kind of person. I think Kurtzman is more of a Trek person. I'm not so sure. I think I saw an interview of him when he said he actually liked Star Trek. But it is. I think like I said, it has more action. It is more action heavy, more fights in space, more aliens, more alieny and kill people. There is a lot more gore. So you kind of see, the mainstream movie type of thing going on in Discovery too.
Do you think Discovery was always slated to have a second season, or did they just wait to see how well the first season was received?
I am pretty sure they waited to see how well the first season was received. Star Trek it was kind of risky because the 2009 movie did well, but I think the latest, the third movie didn't do very well at all.
Well, Into Darkness actually did better in the box office than 2009, but it was less well received by the fans. In fact, it's kind of hated by most of the fans.
And don't forget that 2009 also had Benedict Cumberbatch, which was very popular at the time.
Exactly. And then when Beyond came out, there was this long 4-year gap. And it didn't do very well at the box office at all, not at all what they were projecting. But it's general consensus from the fans that it was the best movie of the three. So, at that point, it's no surprise that they've, with all the budget problems and in-house fighting between the executives at Paramount, it's no surprise that they haven't continued the Star Trek movies.
Yeah.
So you seem to think that they were always going to make no, they weren't going to make a season 2 if, let's say, the first season completely bombed and nobody subscribed to
because
it.
I think CBS, like I said, CBS doesn't have a lot of draws. They don't have a lot of franchise, and franchise is kind of the name of the game these days. So I think if this would have bombed, they would have said, okay, let's try something else. Let's put Star Trek back on the shelf.
Well, I think it's interesting that at this same time, when they announced Star Trek Discovery, or they were actually showing Star Trek Discovery, they're talking about making other Star Trek shows at the same time. foremost being the one they wanted to bring back Picard.
I think the Picard show only started, making a buzz after the first season. I think they were thinking of several options of how to make a new Star Trek show, and this was the kind of the rumors that were hanging around. But if the first season of Discovery would have failed, I'm not sure they would have gone in any other direction.
Well, contrary to that, I kind of think that if it had failed, they probably would have immediately tried another Star Trek show with, especially the one with Picard, because so many people like the Next Generation, and he would be actual returning lead of the show. I kind of feel like they had several ideas in the works in the event Discovery didn't do well.
Well, I guess we'll never know, but I don't think it would have. Yeah, but I don't think
No.
it would have. I don't think it would have been, profitable for them to do that. If the show would have bombed, I think they would have said, well, I guess Star Trek is just not something that fans are into. There is no fan base for it, so we better work on something else. Because like I said, Picard is popular. He is a returning character, but the original series is what most people think about when they think Star Trek. Besides fans, a lot of fans do like the Next Generation more than the original series. But in the general population, Star Trek is mostly the original series. And while Picard is a returning actor, well, Patrick Stewart is sort of famous. He's in this niche corner of famous where he's very famous as among people who like science fiction and fantasy and stuff like that. But I think for the general population, they wouldn't have really cared for Picard returning for another show.
Should we just sort of go through some of the similarities that the Discovery has with the original series?
Okay, I think I want to go back for a moment. I think it's related to it. To the look of
Mm-hmm.
the show, which a lot of people complain that it doesn't really look like the original series. Um, but after a while, I think people started kind of to realize that the show, Discovery, the ship, and the uniforms don't look a lot like the original series. They do kind of look like the first movie, the motion picture. and
Mm-hmm.
and there is something to that because the uniforms, for example, for the medics are white in this show, like they are white in the motion picture. Um, yeah,
Yes.
and the ship does look very gray and white and black and blue, which is mostly the colors of the ship in the motion picture. There is a point to it. I don't think they actually made it on purpose to look like that. But people eventually kind of accepted this is the look now. This is what it looks now.
Well, I think for those who stuck with watching the show, I mean, from what I heard, the show itself it's fairly well produced. So, and I could see that they would eventually warm up to the characters on the show.
Yeah, they did. I think there were a lot of minor characters that were secondary characters that were later introduced that were very popular with the fans, like Tilly, for example. Anthony
Yeah,
Tilly was very popular. Saru, like we said, is popular. I think Lorca also became popular. He wasn't a very yeah.
that's what I was going to ask you. Like, what are the fan
Yeah.
favorites?
So yeah. So Lorca did become favorite. I think he's kind of a dividing character because on one hand he's very much not your typical Star Trek captain. He's very warlike and is very action oriented, which most captains are kind of explorers, but they aren't looking for a fight. Lorca is very specifically looking for fights, and he wants to win wars and stuff like that. There were so many theories about who Lorca's real identity during the first season of Discovery. I think you were
Mm-hmm.
witness to a lot of our debates of who he could be. Um, but
Well, what's interesting though is, uh, you know, with what they inevitably did with season one, They never intended for Lorca to remain the captain for another season.
That is interesting. Yes. I think.
So I think in that Discovery differs from so many of the other Star Trek shows because you have generally the captain who is the captain from season to season of the ship or the starbase. And here we have musical chairs, musical captain chair from one season to the next in
Yeah.
Discovery.
I think the best analogy I heard for it is that the captain of the Discovery is like the teacher of the teacher of the defense against the dark arts in Harry Potter. Like he changes every season.
That's an awesome
Yeah.
analogy.
Yeah, that's pretty much accurate, I think, and I would personally would be very glad with it. We've never really seen a show where the crew stays the same, but the captain changes every season.
The difference with this show and the others is that Michael Burnham is actually the lead character of the show. So she's not the captain, but she is the lead character of the
Yeah.
show. So the captain isn't actually the lead character of the show, which is just different.
I think in the original series, Kirk was pretty much the main character. But in the following series, Next Generation, Voyager, Deep Space Nine, Enterprise, I think too, though I haven't seen it at all. There wasn't actually a designated main character. There were basically the bridge crew were all the main characters for several episodes. They all got their own episodes and their own storylines.
If you think about the plot of the first season of Discovery, it follows
Exactly.
Michael
So Discovery
Burnham.
is different in that we have a main character again, which we didn't have since the original series.
Exactly. So what if she had not ended up on, another ship? What if we had followed her through some other being part of like a Section 31 or something? The show could have gone a totally different way because we were following her progress.
And I think a lot of people actually were. I think I see a lot of people now kind of saying, I wish we had the show. We had the show set on Michael Burnham when she was serving in the Shenzhou under Captain Georgiou, and not on the Discovery with all the secrets and fights and stuff. Because a lot of people kind of felt that Captain Georgiou, the original captain, the prime Captain Georgiou, was a very Star Trek captain, and this looked like a very Star Trek series. The captain and the bridge crew, and they all seem to be friends and working together. Um, and what we got eventually is very, very something very different. I don't think we ever saw anything like Discovery before.
Could we touch very briefly on the format of the show? Because, I mean, obviously, like Star Trek series that came before Discovery were very episodic. And it's almost like within one episode, you have a story to tell, and you end that story by the end of the episode. And especially in the original series, where you'd always see Kirk and his crew on the bridge just having a good laugh after whatever mishap or adventure they had just come out of. How was that different in Discovery?
Yeah, Discovery is not episodic at all. I think since the Next Generation, we had kind of storylines going on through the episodes, but they weren't very overt. Like we had like things that happened, things that caused one another, basically, that were very clearly seen since the Next Generation. Especially Deep Space Nine was very known for it. But yeah, in Discovery we see complete story arcs go from episode to episode, and there is no. I think there are a few standalone episodes, but they are the rare ones. Most episodes follow the storyline.
Why do you think they made this decision to not do an episodic format?
Exactly, because this is what shows look like today. For the same reason they made the show as more space fights, and because and why we have so much, why it's so dark. Like visually, it's very dark. And that's because that's how shows look today, and that's how storytelling in shows go today. It's very plotty.
Hmm. I suppose we could have a whole side discussion on whether or not the audience actually needs to have like the secrets and the burning questions that they always bring up from the start of the season
Yeah.
that you have to wait to the end of the season to have answered. I mean, I know that's the way we consume, like you said, we consume most of our television shows through that manner. It's just one long storyline that's it's like reading a book, and every chapter, what's happening in that chapter is building upon what happened before. And I just find it interesting that this is the future of Star Trek television.
I'm not so sure it is because I think the reason we are seeing more shows who are like plotty and stuff is because streaming basically the Netflix formula, I guess you can say, that you upload an entire season at once and then people watch it, and to to engage people, to make them watch from one episode to the next, you give it a very long plot, so there will be suspense and people will want to see more. But anthology series don't really do that. Standalone episodic series don't really do that. They kind of rely on people just turn on the TV and being able to just pick up an episode and get into it.
Right, so that is the future of Star Trek television shows. I mean, particularly CBS is going to continue to keep them on their streaming service.
But I think there is kind of a fatigue of that. I think people are kind of tired of very heavy plots that last for 10, 15 episodes. I think there are more shows that are less plotty and more episodic.
Oh, speaking of, what's the episode count for the season? The first season and the
Um,
second season. Is it is it shorter or long or about the same that it is for a television show today, which is generally anywhere from like 20 to 24 episodes long?
I think the first season had 15 episodes. The second season had 14 episodes.
So it's a little shorter than it normally would be, or it used to be.
It's shorter than it used to be. I think it's about the same as other streaming shows. In Netflix, most shows have either 10 or 13 episodes. So I think it's about that size.
Do you think that was the right amount of episodes for the plot that they had going on in the first season? Should it have been more condensed, or could they have done more with it?
I think the first season was very confused. The writers were very confused. I think it had enough episodes. I don't think they would have benefited from more episodes, honestly. I think maybe more episodes would have made them be more episodic. Maybe would have gotten more episodic episodes. But there is a voice in me that says if they had more episodes, they would just take the plot and stretch it out and make it even heavier, and this wouldn't be a very good idea.
So what was confusing about the first season then?
Okay, the first season started with Michael Burnham basically starting the war with the Klingons. And then it veered off in a lot of weird directions. We had a Klingon spy who looks like a human, and the love story between that Klingon spy who looks like a human and Michael Burnham. And then we had, we had Mud jumping in from time to time. And then we actually went from the War of the Klingons to the Mirror Universe. And suddenly the War of the Klingons didn't really matter, and we were all in the Mirror Universe, and we had like several episodes in the Mirror Universe. And yeah, it was just, I think it was, Brian Fuller had an idea, and it wasn't complete. So the writers had to just
overcomplicate it.
Yeah, they just overcomplicated it extremely. And I'm not so sure that, for example, that Lorca was supposed to be from the Mirror Universe from the beginning. Like, I'm not sure that was the original idea for him.
You know what would be funny? Because so many fans actually thought that he was from the Mirror Universe, if they wrote that into the season.
It would have been funny, actually, yeah.
I think that was one of the most popular theories, right?
Yeah, it was. And um, well, when it comes to the mirror universe, I think I don't like the direction they took of it, but I think it's like the mirror universe started to be kind of ruined by Star Trek from like Deep Space Nine, basically. So it wasn't their fault. They weren't the one who started to ruin the mirror universe concept, but I still didn't like it very much.
I think we did discuss this in the Mirror Universe episode that we
Yeah.
did. But I still find it very humorous that the only way you could tell if someone who was from the Mirror Universe was in the Prime Universe was them being sensitive to light.
Yeah. They literally had to make. I think they actually wrote it in just to explain to fans why everything is so dark all the time. Fans were literally complaining about how dark the show looked, and I wouldn't be surprised if they just put it in just to explain it.
Well, you mentioned how fans were very much like Captain Georgiou, right? They really liked who Michelle Yeoh played, but then, as you know, Michelle Yeoh's character essentially dies in the first episode of the show. How did fans feel about seeing her return as a Mirror Universe counterpart?
I think originally, well, Michelle Yeoh, of course, is still popular. I think originally people were kind of nervous, but I think she turned out to be really one of the greatest returning characters they had.
So people are still looking forward to her character, even though it's not the Prime version, but it's a different version. It's still popular.
Yeah, I think it's popular, for different reasons. The original Captain, I think people want to see, a traditional Star Trek show about a crew that is of people of the future working together and discovering great things. But the new Georgiou is kind of fun in how, mirror universe she is. She is sly and
Manipulative.
she lies, manipulative. She's cool. She doesn't give a crap about anything, or maybe she does.
She's literally the ruler of the Mirror Universe.
She is the emperor. Yeah, she's the emperor.
She rules the empire.
Yes, she is. And it was very. I think people were kind of pleased with how a character, her mirror character turned out. I think still people say they wouldn't mind seeing the show focusing on her, captaincy in the Georgiou or prime captain.
Actually raises another question for me, Soda. How do you think the reception for Michael Burnham has changed from the beginning of the first season to the end of the first season? Do you think people warmed up to her and liked her character more? That they were looking forward to the second season, or like how was that?
I think, I actually don't think the character of Michael Burnham, changed that much. Not in terms of character development, in terms of her likability. I think people who liked her from the first episode or so still liked her by the end, but the people who weren't able to connect with her, I don't think they were won over by the end of the first season or the end of the second season. I think a lot of people, even if they didn't like Michael as a character herself very much, they did like. There were a lot of people who liked the other characters enough to continue watching.
So Michael Burnham's character is still sort of divisive.
Yeah, she is kind of divisive still. Um, Also, a lot of people, didn't really like the idea of having a main character. Some thought, maybe we want to follow other characters. Like I said, a lot of people wanted to see Georgiou more or Saru or yeah. So people just kind of, I think, like I said, her character is kind of like it or leave it.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to talk about for the first season of Discovery?
I think we already talked about the episode that explains, the rift between Spock and Sarek about Spock going to the Starfleet, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So basically, that's basically the most relevant episode to the original series of the first season.
Did the first season do anything else besides, for instance, expand on the canon of the Mirror Universe? Did it contribute anything else to Star Trek canon?
Well, there was the interesting addition of logic extremists, which I think a lot of people theorized exists, but we never saw really a confirmation of their existence that much. But basically, these are Vulcan terrorists who are kind of insular, and they want to keep, Vulcan for Vulcans, I guess.
I've never heard of this. That's interesting.
Yeah, and basically they are against Vulcans mixing ideologically or in any other way with non-Vulcans.
And so clearly there would be some dislike for Sarek and his human wife and half-human child and adopting another human child.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, we've talked about the Klingons and, we talked about the Mirror Universe counterparts. What about the Vulcans in general, besides this strange sect? Are the Vulcans more or less the same?
They are. We don't see that many Vulcans besides Sarek and Spock. And yeah, the logic extremists are really the only ones we kind of see from the Vulcan society.
Well, I guess where I'm going with this is if the humans in the Federation and the Federation itself is having such a difficult time deciding what to do with the war with the Klingons, how far do they go to fight, or do they try and peacefully end the war, etc., etc. Like, where do the Vulcans stand on that? What is Sarek's role in that? I mean, obviously in the original series, Sarek was an ambassador, and he did have a voice when it came to trying to be in the middle of diplomatic issues between at least planets in the Federation or planets who were trying to join the Federation. So I can't imagine that he would be sitting out in a war that is literally dividing the galaxy.
Yeah. Well, in the episode I mentioned, he is actually going to try and negotiate peace between several Klingon factions and Federation, and he's attacked on his way by the logic extremists.
Oh, okay. So he's still as involved politically in Federation matters as he is in the original series.
Yeah, he is pretty much. He's still active. He's still going from places to places, trying to, be on diplomatic missions for various reasons. Yeah.
And it isn't until the second season that we actually get to meet Amanda. Is that correct?
No, she appears. She appears in flashbacks in the sixth episode, and she also appears at the end of the first season.
Do you get a sense of her character?
Yeah, you do. You do kind of get a sense of her character because even when she's not on screen, Michael does speak very fondly of her.
Ah, okay. So the one you don't get a sense of is Spock.
Exactly. She barely mentions Spock. He mentions him, I think, only once.
Is it what we would call like a name drop? Oh,
Yeah,
my brother
basically.
Spock. Da 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 da.
Basically. Yeah, basically. I don't think she even said his name. It's more like she mentions Amanda reading to her a book when she was a child, and she's like, my human adopted mother on Vulcan used to read this book to me and her son.
Oh. Okay. Well, if you don't have anything else to like anything that we need to talk about in depth in season 1, I think that really leads us into season 2.
I think it's time to go to season 2. Yeah. Season 1 basically ends with them with this like big moment when they like encounter the Enterprise, basically.
And this is the Enterprise captained by Christopher Pike.
Exactly. So this is Christopher Pike of Ensign Mount, and when Ensign Mount was first announced, a lot of people were like disappointed because they were hoping for the actor from the movies whose name I forgot.
Bruce Greenwood.
Exactly that one. and they weren't sure he was going to do a good job, but I think eventually he became very popular. And of course there was Spock, and they kind of teased us about Spock because they did announce that he was going to be in the season, but he wasn't in the first episode, and he wasn't in the second episode. I don't which episode was he eventually in. I think the fourth episode.
I read an article before they actually started airing season 2 about Anson Mount, and it turns out he was very, very excited to be a part of the Star Trek franchise because he's a Star Trek fan.
Mm-hmm.
And I think once I read that, I actually felt a little bit more hopeful about who they picked to play Christopher Pike, because I think we've seen from experience that someone who is familiar with the tenets of Star Trek and who has a love for the show tends to bring a little more to the character at times than an actor or a writer or a producer who literally knows nothing about what Star Trek is.
Yes, but I think it's kind of, it depends. I think sometimes it's true. Sometimes, people who aren't familiar with the franchise can bring in a new perspective.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Like the director for the Wrath of Khan and the Undiscovered Country, I forgot his name, the famous director. He never watched Star Trek before he worked on these movies, but eventually, he brought a new perspective to the characters, and a lot of people did like it.
Wasn't it Nicholas
Myers, I think, yeah, Nicholas Myers, no?
Yeah. I think what I was just trying to say there, Soda, was it just made me really happy to think that we were getting someone to play Captain Pike who was excited to be in that role.
Yeah, I agree.
And to help expand the character, because obviously Pike was a very secondary character in the original series.
Yeah. And I hear that even now he says he would be very happy to play Pike if they decide to make a series about Pike, basically. So when it comes to Spock, we were basically teased for many episodes about Spock because he was mentioned a lot, unlike the first season. But I think we didn't see him until like the 6th or 7th episode.
I think I read that somewhere, yeah, that he didn't show up till at least a third of the way through the show.
Yeah, and
yet wasn't there this sense of urgency? Did they know at that point that he was already in trouble?
I think the story of the second season is there are 7 signals that appear across space, and they kind of want to know what they are, and they go investigate them. And basically, Spock, for some reason, knew about those signals and who sent them, but he disappeared. And so the entire story is chasing the signals and chasing Spock, who seems to escape. And there seems to be someone who is very adamant about keeping Spock away from the signals and from people who might know why he knows them, and etc. It's basically a very mystery kind of thing. There is a chase, so there's a lot of tension, and there's a lot riding on the Discovery crew finding Spock.
Right, so what a way to make people tense for 6 episodes. It's not that Spock is going to have a cameo in the season and just show up for a couple of episodes and then disappear. He's actually integral to the plot of the season.
Yeah. And not only that, but a lot of people also really wanted to see what is the relationship like between Michael and Spock, because she didn't talk about it much at all.
Before Spock actually shows up in whatever episode it is, do you start to see a hint of what her relationship is like with Michael before that, or do you not really see that until they're actually together?
Well, the fact that Michael kind of doesn't want to talk about it that much is kind of an evidence in itself. They do hint that Michael and Spock have a very tense relationship. They're not very close. And it's hinted that it's because Michael feels guilty that it's that it's the way it is, because we don't actually find out until a very later episode in the season. But yeah, they do kind of tease us, but they never really go into it. So, which is basically another way of just keeping us, in the dark and wanting to see more.
Mm-hmm. And at what point does Amanda show up?
Amanda does show up, I think, in the kind of in the early episodes. She shows up obviously because she is worried about Spock, because there are all of these rumors around of him being unwell, committing himself to a mental institution and then escaping it. Basically, there's a lot of things happening now in Spock that are very worrying to Amanda as his mother. And but she doesn't actually play that big of a part in the season, I think, at the end of the day.
So what you just mentioned about the mental institution, in any way, shape, or form related to Spock worries me. If I had been watching the show and as a Spock fan and I'd heard like Spock did what? What's going on? Who is this Spock that I thought I knew from the original series?
Spock in Discovery is kind of different from the Spock we know of the original series. I think the original series gave me the impression that Spock kind of started to open up to people in the original series and kind of solidified it in the movies.
That's what I thought too. I thought it was hard for him to understand the concept of the bridge crew being family, and yet he was just inexorably drawn into that family essentially, and you don't really see how close he feels to them until the movies.
Exactly. But in the show, it turns out he's actually very close to a lot of Pike's crew members, including, of course, Pike himself. But it kind of makes sense with how loyal he was to Pike in the Menagerie, the episode.
Mm-hmm.
But it also kind of doesn't make sense in the sense of, we all kind of thought he only opened up to people in the original series.
Yeah, it was almost like he arrogantly looked down on humans.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Are you telling me he had friends before Kirk and Pike?
He apparently did.
That's interesting.
It is interesting. I'm not sure if I like this this revelation. Besides that, I think Anthony Ethan Pack. I think he does a good job. I haven't, like I said, I haven't seen the new movies, but one problem I had with Quintos is that I thought his voice wasn't deep enough to be Spock, and Ethan Peck does have the deep voice that Spock should have, so I kind of like that.
Can we talk for a second about Spock's appearance in Discovery, which is, I think, different from the way he is in the original series and even Abrams' verse.
Well, he does sport a beard for a few episodes, but then he shaves it off, and then he looks pretty much like he does in the movies and in the original series.
What about his smiling?
Actually, it doesn't smile that much. Not that I've noticed.
So he doesn't have any facial expression?
Not any. I think he's mad in a lot of episodes, which it is kind of weird of seeing him get emotional, but it's part of the story. Part of the story is that he kind of has. I wouldn't call it a mental breakdown because it involves like alien entities, basically. But he goes through some stuff, and it's kind of hard on him.
Where is he in his human Vulcan dichotomy? Because I think when we see him in the original series, he's committed to being more Vulcanian. Of course, it isn't until he gets teased a lot and the whole family thing happens that he eventually seems to come to grips with being both human and both Vulcan. What is he like in Discovery from that respect?
That's kind of the problem, I think, with the characterization of Spock. And I think that's kind of the problem that maybe a lot of fans were afraid of when they started, speaking about Spock being in the show, is that he is characterized pretty much like he's characterized in the movies, actually. That he's pretty, I wouldn't say he's entirely whole with his, human and Vulcan halves, but he's like, he's trying to bridge them. He's not all Vulcan like we see in the early episodes of the original series. Actually, one of the bits of information we get this season is that Spock actually has dyslexia.
Interesting. Really interesting tidbit to add to his the canon for his character.
And apparently the combination of both not being fully Vulcan and also having dyslexia was very shameful for him, as a Vulcan.
I can imagine so. The Vulcans pride themselves so much on their intellect that if you had any sort of learning disability, which would make you have to work a little harder than your Vulcan counterparts to show that you are as intelligent as they are, I can imagine that would be perceived as shameful.
Exactly, yeah. And it actually ties kind of into the story of the season, because there is this time sliding entity that basically can only communicate with him because of his very special brain makeup.
That's really weird.
Yes, it is.
That actually seems a little far-fetched even for Star Trek, although it couldn't be as worse, it couldn't be as far-fetched as taking his brain out of his body.
I think of all the things they have in Discovery, this is probably the kind of the least weird thing that happens this season.
So, well, tell me then, what are some of the other strange things that go on in the season?
Well, there is the kind of, I guess, a parallel universe of fungus that contain the remains of a dead person, and they can rebuild his body and bring him to our world, basically.
What?
Exactly. Exactly. And
I heard what you said, but
isn't it?
I'm not sure I even followed it. Okay.
Yeah, they are fungal entities from a sort of parallel universe, but not exactly.
Okay, so forget being from Mirrorverse if you're from the fungal universe. Oh my god, I can't say that with a straight face.
The mycelial, they call it mycelial something something. Yeah, basically it's a very, very weird story of like, yeah, there's a character that they killed in the first season and they wanted to bring it back. So they used that, and
No!
that was very
Oh
weird.
no! Soda! Okay, I know all about the death in the first season because so many fans were upset about it. It was hard not to know about it, even if you don't watch the show. Are you telling me they brought him back to life from his fungal counterpart?
It's not his fungal counterpart. There is no fungal counterpart. He kind of got stuck in the fungus universe.
That makes no sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically, what do you do when you kill a character everybody likes and you have to reverse engineer that to bring him back to life? Oh, well, you put his particles in a fungal universe. What? I don't get it. I can't even. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Proceed.
Yeah, that's what you said. There are very weird things this season. And a time traveling suit, basically. And there's another character that, well, the character wasn't killed in the first season, but you kind of were told it was dead in the first season, and now we are told it isn't.
Okay.
Well, okay, since we already warned about spoilers, can I just talk spoiler free?
Yes. Spoilers for first season, even though we pretty much spoiled you for the whole show already. Go ahead.
Spoilers for the first and second season. Here we go. In the first season, we were told, of course, that Michael Burnham's parents are dead. Turns out her mother actually has this time traveling suit that she put on, and she's actually gets stuck somewhere in the future. And she has been able to slide back into various points in time, but she can't really control it. And there is this kind of mechanical entity that is basically taking over ships in Starfleet and is trying to kill people. And they kind of have to stop it with the help of Michael Burnham's mother and the suit, basically.
She's the Red Angel.
She is the Red Angel, but also Michael. At the end of the season, Michael dons the suit herself and goes to various points. She's the one who's making signals, basically.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's a trope we've seen before in many sci-fi shows. The only way to keep continuity in the universe is to have someone go back in time and make sure that these events take place so that all the other events building up to whatever it is you need to defeat the big bad happens too. Yeah.
And I think the most interesting part is the ending where to defeat the entity, basically Discovery, the ship with all of its people, travel to the future.
How far in the future?
Almost 1,000 years in the future.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah. Basically, we don't see what happens to them in 1,000 years. You only see them disappear. And we see the effect of it. We see basically the people who are involved in this and who are left behind, which are, Pike and Spock and everyone else on the Enterprise, basically vow to never speak of it again.
Wow, okay. So
yes.
Is it then perceived that Spock and Captain Pike and the Enterprise go on to do their whatever it is that brings them up to the events leading up to the original series?
Yes, and it kind of also explains why Spock never mentions Michael, and also why we don't see the spore drive that they have on the Discovery used anywhere else, and why basically also because in this season we see basically Spock and Sarek talking, which kind of it's against canon because in the original series, Amanda says that Spock and Sarek haven't spoken for 20 years.
I know. I was just thinking of that.
I guess the reason behind it is because they were speaking in the context of Michael and their mission, and I guess they vowed never to speak of any of the things that happened there again, so they pretend it never happened.
Okay. That's pretty serious. Does this hamper them creating a season 3 of Discovery?
No, because I think the third season would probably take place 1,000 years in the future.
I'm just trying to wrap my mind around that.
I think it would be interesting. A lot of people, like I said, a lot of people were disappointed that Discovery was set 10 years before the original series and in the past of Star Trek as a franchise in general. I think people were expecting, a continuation of what happened after Voyager. And they were disappointed when Enterprise was set before the original series, and they're disappointed again when Discovery was set before it.
1,000 years in the future is much further ahead than Voyager.
Exactly. So it could be very interesting. Who knows if the Federation still exists?
Well, it's Star Trek for you, going where no one has gone before.
Exactly.
1,000 years in the future. Well, I think we should circle back to some of the season 2.
If you aren't too shocked yet.
Are there any other major or really important secondary characters to the plot in season 2? Other than, obviously you have Michael Burnham, Spock, Captain Pike, the Red Angel, and then probably Spock's parents. Is there anyone else that has a big role?
Well, there is, but they aren't really related to the original series. They get a new engineer, basically, which I think became a fan favorite very, very quickly. She's great. She has basically a lot of chemistry with the other characters. She's kind of, kind of sarcastic and not very nice, but in a way that reminds me of, of like McCoy or something.
I was gonna say she sounds like McCoy.
Yeah. Played by Tig Noto, I think. Her name, the real name of the Tig Noto, the real name of the actress, it sounds more Star Trekky than the name of the character. um, she plays Jet Denise Jet Reno, or like her nickname is Jet.
Actually, this might take us back for a second, but how integral was Mud to the plot in season 1?
Not not at all.
Oh, why did they bring him into the show though?
I think it's more of like a levity kind of thing, something funny, because it was very dark and heavy and bloody. So I guess he was the comedic, you know.
Well, I do feel like when we talked about Mud, I think in the Mirror Universe episode, didn't you mention that he's darker as a character?
He's darker as a character because I think in the original series he was more about, making money and having fun.
And avoiding his wife?
Yeah, but I think it was part of making money and having fun. And in the in Discovery, it was basically about. Well, in the first episode, we see him. He's basically trying to save his own skin by selling out Starfleet officers. And in the second episode, we see him. He's basically trying to get revenge on someone. So he is kind of darker.
Well, I don't know. I mean, he does try to get revenge on Kirk in the original series.
He does, yes, but he's more of a fun guy, and I mean, his revenge in the original series was basically to get the crew stuck in a planet where, well, it's not very, it's not a nice situation, but they wouldn't be missing for anything on this planet. Here, he actually tries to kill someone, so it's kind of darker.
Ooh, okay. Have we missed any other original series characters besides Pike and Spock and Mud that have an appear? Oh, and Sarek and Amanda that have an appearance Discovery.
Well, there is, number one.
Oh yes, yeah. Tell me about number 1.
Actually, I was disappointed that she didn't have a big part in this season. I would have liked to see much more of her. We saw, in the last episode, we did see the bridge of the Enterprise finally, and it looked very much like the original series, and that made me very happy. Like, it didn't look exactly the same because,
You mean it looks more like a starship and less like a 60s set? A 60s
exactly,
television set, yeah.
yes, it does look very much like the original series. Bridge, it is very colorful, and um, it does look nice actually. That's one of the reasons why I would be also happy to have a show about Pike's Enterprise, because it does give me a nostalgic feeling.
What about their
And
what about their uniforms in that scene?
yeah, I think they kind of meshed it well, the Discovery style and the original series style, because the the uniforms in the original series did look kind of like pajamas.
Are there any mini skirts?
And no, there are not. Not that I saw, anyway.
Good.
Yeah, so I think it looks nice. I think it looks very uniform. It looks much more uniform than the original series. But they maintained the colors.
Was there any change in like colors that represent the different departments in the way that there have been between the original series and some of the later Star Trek shows?
Well, there has been a change between the original series and the Next Generation.
Yes, I mean that's one example. In Discovery, when they start to adopt colors, they just are you saying they adopt original series coloring?
Yeah, they seem to. Like I said, in Discovery itself, the only real difference seems to be that the usual crew wears blue uniforms and the medical crew wears white uniforms.
Right. Well, even in Abrams' verse, at the end of Into Darkness, you see McCoy in a full white uniform,
Yeah.
which I think is also a callback to one of the original series movies.
It's possible, yeah. But in Discovery, they didn't really have colors until we saw the Enterprise. I think they said that the Enterprise, the ship, the Enterprise ship is older than Discovery, which is why it looks different. But the uniforms are newer. I think the stuff with like Taylor just kind of makes up new uniforms whenever he's bored
I
because they change so often.
have a question for you. I want to ask you, what is your favorite thing about Star Trek Discovery? And what's your least favorite thing?
My favorite thing about Discovery. There are a few characters that I really enjoy. Um, I mean, I like the new production value. I like the visuals. I like the effects. I like that it looks, more slick and more realistic. Um, I do like I said, I like several characters. I thought Jack Reno was a very good new character. I like Saru. I like Tilly. I do like Burnham actually, and I like both Lorca and Pike for different reasons, and also Georgiou, Prime and Mirror Universe Georgiou. My least favorite part about Discovery, I have to say, I think it's kind of. I still think they haven't really found their like footing exactly. They don't really know where they're going. I hope maybe the ending of the second season maybe shows that they have decided on a direction. But so far, like both seasons felt kind of like confused a little.
Okay, what do you think Discovery did very well? And what do you think they flubbed? Like, completely messed up. They should just do it over.
I actually kind of like that they sent them to the future. I really did. The more I think about it, the more I kind of wish they would set the show in the future of Star Trek instead of in the past. I think the past is well explored enough. Let's go to places where no one went before. But what they should do, I think it kind of answers both questions, right? Because I do think they needed to find a better direction, and I think they kind of did it. But we'll have to see in the third season.
I read a little bit about what some of the things are that fans took grievances against. And, as we've gone through the podcast, we've talked about a fair number of those things. I think the one that we didn't talk about in detail was the Klingon turned human.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, I'm not very interested in his character, or yeah. I think the entire Klingon plot might have been better discarded. Let's forget about it and never mention it again.
so
um,
so perhaps that's something that they flubbed. Or,
yeah,
as we say, they could have done a much better job was making use of the Klingons in the show.
yeah, because it would have been interesting to see like a Klingon, Klingon cult or religious Klingons. But I think the execution was very poor. Um, so yeah, I really have no desire to go back to the Klingons.
Was the love interest between Michael and that character shocking to anyone?
Uh, Even back when the first season was kind of, going underway, people were kind of theorizing that the character of Ash, he's called Ash as a human and Vok as a Klingon. The character of Ash, he's actually Vok in disguise. I mean, basically turned out they're right.
Just like with Lorca and the Mirror Universe.
Yeah, but for Ash and Vok, there were a lot more clues actually. Yeah, so I don't think it was surprised in the sense that people weren't very focused on it, so it didn't really bother them. So they weren't surprised or unsurprised. It was just a thing that happened.
Was it done well or was it awkward?
I think it was done well as well as it could have been done because the entire Klingon story was done very awkwardly. There were a lot of yeah, there were a lot of problems with it. The character of Ash is supposedly he was an actual person that was kind of merged with Buck. He was captured by the Klingons, and for a long time he acted, as a former prisoner of war of the Klingons, and he had a lot of, he had PTSD from the things he experienced under the Klingons. There was the story that he had memories of basically being raped, but by one of the Klingon guards. And it was kind of an interesting story because you don't see that done on many shows, seriously done.
Even especially Star Trek.
Exactly. So a
Yes,
lot of
that's
people,
yeah.
yeah. So a lot of people were kind of surprised that they were taking this direction, but they were kind of, pleasantly surprised because it's really not talked about that much. And then, of course, it turned out he wasn't raped. It was just the memories of Vax sleeping with that Klingon guard. So a lot of people were disappointed in that. Basically, it was, disappointment all around from the Klingon story.
Okay, so I think that really covers that pretty much closes for me, like one of the last things on my list that I heard from fans that really bothered them. But whenever I go to, when I did some research to see what is it that people really, really liked about Discovery, top of the list was the first depiction of a gay couple.
Yeah, which other people were also kind of upset about when one of those, the couple, was killed in the first season.
And apparently brought back in a very awkward way.
Yeah, I think it
Yeah.
was a very awkward way because there were options, I think, to bring him back in a maybe less awkward way, I guess. But for some reason they chose that way, which is okay.
In a more scientifically sound way.
I guess, yeah, maybe bring his counterpart from the Mirror universe, or I don't know, maybe something. But yeah, it was very weird.
The relationship between the couple was very well received, I believe.
It was. I think a lot of people felt that it was, overdue, really,
Yeah.
because Star Trek has been on the front of a lot of, social issues. So it's kind of weird it took them this long to have a main couple who is gay.
So, what do you think is next on the progressiveness, or on the next on the list to make the show more progressive? If you had to guess, for example, we've heard about like Andorians mating in pairs of 4. Are we
Yeah,
gonna get to see that?
it's a popular theory. Yes. Maybe, but I won't be surprised if there will be like trans characters in the future. I would be very happy to see more Native American characters. They tried to have one in Voyager and it went very wrong. So I think they should fix that.
Not to mention the worst episode where we talked about the original series
Yeah, exactly.
Native American episode.
They never got them right, and I think they should work on that. If I had to guess, I would say they would address the trans characters first, and I don't think they would do anything with Native American characters.
Outside of alien or non-human cultures, was there a lot of mention of religion?
Actually, there was because of the Red Angel story. The entity that spread the past looked like a red angel. There was a mention of like a group of humans who escaped Earth like 300 years ago, and the Red Angels carried them to a safe place, and they started like sort of a religion around it.
Okay, so if we think about the original series, right, there are several episodes where they continue to harken back to like Christianity or the American law, or like our Constitution, things like that.
Yeah.
Was there any sort of that embedded into even just the mentioning of the history of like United Earth before it became the Federation, et cetera, et cetera?
Not really, not that I could notice. they really didn't talk about.
Yeah, I was wondering because, well, as you know, the original series made in the 60s, they were already bringing up social issues and this, that, and the other, and so these things just kind of like naturally work themselves into the scripts, in that time period. I was wondering if Discovery was more neutral on the issue of like one religion versus another religion or something of that nature.
Well, there is one time because of these, they try basically to gain the trust of the group of people who start the religion or on the Red Angel because they want to discover more things. So there is like one of the bridge crew of the Discovery that is basically sent on this mission because she grew up in a religious community, but it really doesn't mention anything more than that.
Okay, okay. So less propaganda.
Yeah. And of course, there are the Klingons with Kailash, and we actually see more of Saru's people, and we discover more about them. So that was pretty interesting.
How many different alien cultures are encountered in Discovery?
Not as many actually. Because of Saru and the Klingon, Saru's species is called Kelpians.
Yeah.
Besides Kelpians and their enemies on the planet, which I forget the name of, and the Klingons, we don't really see that many alien cultures. There is a Discovery crew member who is Saurian, Saurian Brandy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have a Saurian representing finally. Basically, that's it. And there is another alien who is there is not an alien, but she's a human who has a lot of like robotic implants, I guess.
So not quite a full android like Data, but part.
Yeah, part android exactly.
Well, it's a good thing they didn't do a full android because probably would have made a lot of Next Generation fans upset.
Yeah.
Even though technically we see plenty of androids in the original series.
Yes, but they were never quite on the same level as Data.
No, no, of course
Yeah.
not. Nowhere near the same level as him.
Yeah.
So you talked about potential season 3, and if there was a potential season 3 that they might be set in 1,000 years in the future. I have a question for you though. Who would be the captain of the Discovery in that instance?
I think it was hinted pretty strongly that it would be Saru, but I wouldn't be surprised if they find someone in the future who will become their captain for a season.
So they're still playing musical chairs with the captain's chair.
It's possible. It's possible, but maybe not. Maybe Saru does take the captaincy for good. Who knows?
Was there ever any intention of having Michael promoted to captain?
I think in the first season they maybe hoped to create like a story of her climbing from like after she started the work she was kind of demoted.
Right.
She before she started the work she was the first officer, but then she was demoted. So I think maybe they hope the series would be kind of her like climbing back up until she becomes the captain. But I think now more people would be happy to see Saru as a captain.
I find that really interesting because I guess in my mind, since I'm still stuck in like the first season, I would have expected that they were going to follow her progress to captain of the ship. So it does surprise me that now there's someone else who seems as if they would be a better fit for the captaincy than she would.
Yeah, I think either way it would be interesting. I mean, we never had a non-human captain before.
That's very true. Very true. I mean, we've seen non-human captains fight the various Federation ships all the time.
Yeah.
But you're right. I don't think we've ever had a show where a non-human was the captain. I think we're getting very close to the end here, Soda. But I did want to talk briefly, or just hear your thoughts briefly on the ship, the Discovery itself, because you alluded to it being different than any other Federation class starship, and so I wanted to hear a little more about that because I'm not too familiar with the Discovery.
Well, first of all, I think unlike every ship, every ship every show has its own character. The original series Enterprise was very colorful. The Next Generation Enterprise looks more like a flying hotel than a ship.
That is a great way to
Um,
characterize that ship.
yeah. Deep Space Nine didn't even have a ship. I mean, it did have a ship, but most of the show was centered around the space station. Voyager is a very tiny, cramped ship. It feels tiny, basically. I haven't seen Enterprise, but Discovery. I think
Let's just say it looked like an old ship.
Discovery. I think it feels more. First of all, it feels more like what our modern expectation would be of a spaceship. I guess of a very high tech spaceship. It's all very silver and white and black. There is a lot of blueprints and touch screens everywhere.
I mean, how is it different as a scientific vessel? You mentioned something about a spore drive.
Yeah, they have something called the spore drive, which Discovery was specifically created to host the experimental thing that's called the spore drive. Basically, spores exist throughout all the universe, and the spore drive is able to basically travel through the mycelial network, they call it, which is kind of like jumping dimensions. It's kind of like they really do call it jumping.
Actually, that's a common space travel method of space travel in other sci-fi novels and shows that I've seen. Is it's like not the warp drive per se, but sort of like a jump drive where you just pick a point and pick another point and you literally jump and you jump through space to that point in a matter of seconds.
Yeah, it's basically like a transporter. An engine, entire engine is a transporter for the ship, and it can get from one place to another in seconds. So it's much faster than the warp drive. The problem is that it is very hard to pilot it. You need someone who can pilot it through the mycelial network, and basically there is only one person currently who can do it, which is I guess he's no longer the main engineer there, but I guess he's just responsible for the spore drive. Lieutenant Stamets, which is I think he's the main science officer.
Question. So, what is it about the spore drive that prevents it from being used in any other ship? Because now that I'm thinking about it, Soda, if this scientific vessel has a prototype drive that nobody else has, and then suddenly jumps to the future, 1,000 years in the future, did they just lose that technology, or did they decide that the technology was too volatile to use in other ships? At that point at which Discovery left, did they just literally take the technology with them?
I think in the first season they had two ships who were working on the project.
Okay.
The first one was destroyed. So Discovery is all that's left, and I think after the first season they kind of decided that it's too dangerous for wide use.
Right, it's too volatile, so they stick with the warp engine.
So they stick with the warp engine, yeah. So basically, yeah, the engine, the spore drive, and everything related to it kind of disappeared with Discovery into the future.
You have covered an amazing amount of information about Discovery. I know I've learned several new things, surprising things, just from this conversation, Soda.
Well, I hope someone remained here, even if they didn't listen to it to the end, even if they didn't watch Discovery. It's not like I wish people spoil themselves, but I hope I help people learn things, even if they haven't watched Discovery.
Is there anything else that comes to mind that you want to mention? Any last note?
Not really. I really do hope that they make the Pike show actually, and I am very interested in seeing what the third season would look like. I hope they actually stay in the future for more than just one season.
How long do you think it will take them to make an announcement regarding continuation of the show?
Oh, I think they're already working on the third season.
I keep seeing articles saying like, will Discovery have a third season? I'm not sure I know if there is a third season like finalized yet, but it looks like it's heading in that direction.
Just a moment. Yeah, they did get a third season. Yeah, CBS announced on CBS All Access announced that it will have third season already.
Oh, excellent. Is it already in production, and do you think they plan to have it up and running next year?
I don't know if they'll have it by next year, but they do say that there will be a new co-showrunner that will join Alex Kurtzman called Michelle Paradise.
So, we have a third season to look forward to of Star Trek Discovery. And Soda, I know you're going to continue to watch the show. I look forward to that because you will certainly keep me up to date on everything that's going on. I think it'll be interesting to see if they are in the 1,000 years in the future, if they still in some way try to tie it back to other previous Star Trek shows that we've seen. Because if you're in the future, they could name drop just about any captain.
Very true. I mean, 1,000 years in the future, it's very. I think I'm not so sure, but there have been a lot of fans who have said it should be interesting to see like a post-Federation universe.
That's where I was going next. So maybe it'll be more interesting where the Federation no longer exists.
And what happens to the humans, to the Vulcans, yeah.
Or maybe now it's not a within the galaxy. It's not an intergalaxy anymore. It's an intragalaxy where you have a larger federation of multiple galaxies.
That would be very interesting.
Well, I mean, think about in the original series how many times Kirk stumbled across somebody from another galaxy who was messing around in their galaxy or coming to their galaxy to do something.
True. It's true. It would be. I mean, think about the possibility of like going to complete opposites, and like the Federation fell like hundreds of years ago, and people kind of reverted technologically to where we were a long time ago. Maybe we live like in, I don't know, in the caveman times, and we lost all of our technology, and who knows.
I just went right back to the episode Spock's Brain where they're all living on the glacial age planet.
Hopefully not.
They don't even remember the concepts of male and female.
Yeah, hopefully it wouldn't be that bad, but like imagine if you all live on like a Mad Max world.
Let's just say that the Q, like the whole Q society imploded and took the universe with it.
Or maybe like the Borg finally attacked and assimilated all technology, and so in attempt to like get rid of them, we just threw away all of our technology.
That would include spacefaring, so that would be a really terrible future because then the Discovery would be the only spaceship flying around.
Exactly.
Oh.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think they went into the future because of the Next Generation and Voyager and Deep Space Nine, we kind of the universe became like too small. We know most of the species. We know who is an enemy, who is a friend, who is neither, who is both. So it's kind of interesting to see a future so far in the future that you don't know what to expect. Maybe there are new species going on.
I was going to say,
maybe
Terrans are nearly extinct.
Exactly. Maybe there are no more Terrans.
Yeah.
Maybe Discovery has the 100 or so Terrans in the universe. Maybe the Kelpians became an empire. Who knows?
Goodbye, Terrans. Hello, Kelpian.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to stay tuned. Thanks, everyone, for joining us for this fun Discovery-related podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.